Hi, beautiful soul. Welcome, seekers of the mystical realms, to Ask the Oracle with me, your host, the enchanting modern mystic, Suzy Cherub. Are you ready to explore the secrets of the universe and connect with the unseen forces that guide our lives? Join me on this magical journey as we delve deep into the world of oracles, mystics, and the profound art of divination. Together, we'll uncover the mysteries that lie just beyond the veil. So, take my hand and let your curiosity lead the way. The oracle awaits, and our adventure into the mystical begins now. I have a very special guest with me today, my dear friend Leela J. Williams. She's a celebrated figure in the spiritual publishing world. She founded the Spirit Guide in 2002, published Spheres and Spellcraft magazines, and co-founded the Psychic Directory with the Australian Psychics Association. Leela has been honoured with several awards, including Psychic of the Year Award for Queensland, and the Simon Turnbull Award. She has also served as the media spokesperson for the International Psychics Association and has had a regular spot on 2UE's radio's Sharina's Psychic Encounters for over 10 years. Leela lives in Brizzy, Australia, with her 4 gorgeous children and a vast collection of mystical treasures. Today, the title of our podcast is The Oracle's Path, Insights from Leela J. Williams. Leela, a luminary in the spiritual publishing world, shares her journey from growing up with her grandmother's intuitive stories to becoming a celebrated editor, mentor, and psychic ambassador. Tune in as we delve into the art of oracle creation, Leela's role in supporting psychics and creators, including me, and the fascinating stories behind her projects, including Simon Turnbull's Memoir and Maxine Gadd's Zooloogica, the Steampunk Oracle, which I have in my hot little hands, and it's absolutely beautiful. We also get a glimpse into her personal life, her sister's shop, Tarotopia, and her ever-growing collection of mystical treasures. This episode promises to be a heart-centered exploration of intuition, creativity, and spiritual connection. Hi, Leela.
Hello, Suzy Cherub, and thank you so very much for that beautiful introduction.
You're very welcome, my love. It's been an absolute honour and a joy to know you for many years. And I'm so excited for our podcast today because I just love and adore everything you do. And you've been the most amazing support to me and so many in the industry over the years. So I'm really looking forward to diving deep into some of these questions with you.
Well, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to it as well. My absolute pleasure to support yourself and many other psychics. It's always a joy.
Always a joy.
Always a joy.
So beautiful, Leela. Can you share with us how your grandmother's intuitive stories, because I know that you have a very strong connection to her, influenced your journey into the spiritual realm?
I think with my nana, she is my paternal grandma, and a lot of it was stories about her rather than from her, of her. And at the time, of course, well, they emigrated from England to Australia in the 1950s, and at that time there were telephones, but you didn't use them, and you could write home, but it would take a long time for those letters to arrive. And she would, and I think it's about necessity rather than anything else, but she would get a feeling that something wasn't right and phone and pick up the phone. And my dad used to make jokes about how she would just phone around until she found somebody with a problem, found the thing that found
Yeah.
something that matched her intuition. And so, we didn't always take too much notice of it. But he said one day he experienced it where he got the feeling and knew that something was wrong and picked up the phone and was like, oh, it was real after all. And when I started working with the psychic magazines, it was my auntie, when I was telling her about it, who said, oh, well, it had to come out somewhere, had to come out somewhere. So it wasn't that everybody dismissed her psychic ability until they experienced it. It was just a known and accepted thing. And I know even after when my pop died, we'd turn up to my nan's house and you could hear her chatting away when we got to the bottom of the stairs, and everybody thought she was talking to her bird, and of course she wasn't. She was talking to my pop. He never left her. He stayed with her for, even though she survived him by about 25 years. And when she moved from her home she had to go into other care, she was very reluctant to go until I had sat down with her and Pop and said, look, he is going to go with you. He's not connected to the house.
I love it
He's
so much.
connected to
How true is that?
you,
Yeah,
and he will go with you. And my aunt phoned me and said, okay, what did you say to her? Because she's happy to move now, where she was quite distressed. I said, oh, I just told her Pop's going with her. And she was like, oh my gosh, and just burst into tears because it had never sort of occurred to her that that might be the
that was
obstacle.
it.
Yeah.
That was holding her back.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
was very real. He was definitely, she would just chat away to him all day, and it was quite a beautiful thing to know that sort of a connection with anybody. But and that to me, it's very special because it sort of ingrains that idea of how we are connected to those that we love beyond boundary. And that idea has been a big influence through all of the work that I've done. That connection without boundary through love, through love. And other people like Simon, he had that same philosophy, and I guess that is one of the things that can where you find people that you connect with, that they have come to similar ideas through their own journeys, you know. And yeah, I
I've got
do.
goosebumps. I totally resonate with that. And it's so interesting because when I said grandmother, I definitely heard Nan. And I just love that so much. And I love that I think it kind of opens the door, doesn't it, to kind of embrace your own intuitive connection too?
Oh, well, I think when it's in the family and it's normal, absolutely it does. One of the big motivators working in publishing in this realm has been to sort of help people let go of the fear around it, like the
Yes.
fear that it's somehow just, a delusion or imaginary or harmful, or, has a negative um, origins. Like there's not so much now, but if you go back to, a few decades, that people were quite terrified of psychic ability. A lot of people, the only real experience that they'd had or introduction they had was through terrible horror movies or horror
Oh,
novels,
absolutely. Hollywood's
or
got a lot to answer for.
yeah, or the very religious
All that
influences.
religious.
Yeah, so
Yes.
we're in the early 2000s, even we were still talking to people who were afraid. Now, people will more than likely ask, how do I pick an oracle, rather than, is this oracle evil? There's been such a massive change. And from when we first had a psychic shop, that was like in about 1989 or 1990, like people would, actively come and yell in the door at us and leave, religious information, or, basically call us the devil. That's not so much of thing anymore. So yeah, it's the journey of the psychic has really come out of that
Really come out of the
fearful.
closet.
It's come out of that fear space and
Yes.
into more of a loving space, or a more acceptance. And yeah, but I think if you have got somebody in the family, it doesn't matter how close or how far, but just a psychic element or an intuitive element, it does make it easier to accept your own intuition. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
I think I loved that you mentioned connecting through love And for me, that, you know, really opens up that connection to spirit too. So I love that you mentioned that. It often does run in families. I know it runs in my family. But also too, you know, just as you said, with it being normal, it becomes, you know, quite accepted and it's embraced, which is really lovely. So I love that.
Yeah, it is more accepted, and there isn't a fear around it. So fear is well, I don't know so much now, but it used to be a massive thing where you know people would start meditating and they'd be afraid. They'd start using tarot, they'd be too scared to touch it. And so fear, we had to navigate through that fear. And if there isn't that fear because it is accepted or it is just normal, and even if you called it something like, you know, brain's intuition or um, you know, a mother's knowledge or anything like that, it's still an acceptance of that connection. And it is connected through love. And I think if you sit down with a psychic, or if somebody sits down with me for a reading, or even if it's to edit their process, I always try to find that connection through love, because
Oh, you definitely do
once
that.
once that's there, there's nothing to be afraid of. It's a safe space for everybody. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So I'm really curious, what inspired you to enter the world of publishing, especially spiritual publishing? And how did the spirit guide come to be? What's that story?
Well, it's a kind of a circular story. I don't know, you know, like with the Uberith of the snake eating its own tail. So once upon a time, I lived with a group of followers of Rajneesh, who's now known as Osho. I don't know if you know the Osho Zen deck. A lot of people have that deck.
Oh, yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
so I was 17 and moved into this crazy house with a bunch of orange people, as they were called, and we meditated every day, and we studied metaphysics, we studied tarot. I'd been doing palm readings for, I don't know, since I was about 14. I had been studying all of these things. I'd read Linda Goodman's sun signs, everything that I could possibly get my hands on, and there was a lot of material at our home that we could read and study. But yeah, I lived with these people, and we opened a psychic shop where we offered tarot readings. At the time, it was actually illegal to do psychic readings in Queensland
Oh, interesting.
as part of the witchcraft
That wasn't
laws.
that long ago, was it?
No, it
Really?
wasn't. It wasn't that long ago, and it's, I don't know. I like to sort of talk about that because it really does show how far that the psychic world has come. Because
It's almost fashionable now. And I
yeah,
mean that, you know, not as like, you know, Instagram influencers, but it definitely has a more loving vibe around it. It's more fashionable. I think there's been a lot of healing in that space,
oh,
you know.
absolutely. It would
Yeah.
you would pretty much have to hunt down a tarot deck, you know, where now it's easy. You know, you can find what you need. You can find information a lot easier. You don't have to go to a specialist shop or, you know, ask if they have some tarot under the counter. I'd even heard of people having to ask for tarot because it was kept under the counter because it would freak out other
Oh, that's
customers so much.
fascinating.
So yeah, we had
Wow.
this
Yeah.
shop, and we sold crystals because you couldn't do readings. So people would buy a crystal and they'd get a free chat with you, like a free
As
reading
a bit of a rebel, I
with
do
the
kind of like
crystal.
that.
Or they'd buy even at some
Yeah.
places they'd sell them like a flower, and they'd get, so you weren't ever charging for the psychic reading, you were charging for the other thing, and then the reading would be free. So we had a shop, and then we started doing meditations back at our home and having meditation nights and development nights. And a beautiful lady who I'm still friends with came. I met her. Her son was a guitarist and still is, very good. And he was starting a band and was looking for a keyboard player slash singer. So she
Yes.
introduced us. So I was joined the band. In the band
Oh my goodness. Really? I
was
love that.
I was the oldest in the band. I think I was like 19, and the other boys. They were like 15 and 16. So
Yes.
yeah, I was like this mysterious older woman who didn't even live at home, but they were still all at high school. But they used to come over and rehearse at the house where I lived, and the drummer had his mind absolutely blown by a psychic reading. Like it just totally opened up his whole world that there was something else going on.
I
And it
love
was
that aha moment, that
it,
witnessing of like, oh, wow, this is actually real, this stuff,
yeah, well, it completely changed his trajectory. He was on path to become a very successful drummer. He was already doing session drumming and everything. He was very clever. So he ended up going to university and studying philosophy. I didn't keep in touch with him, but I did keep in touch with the guitarist. So we were both in touch with him. So flash forward about 10 years, and he was running the Psychic Club of Australia, and they had their own magazine called the Psychic Interactive, and he was looking for somebody to help to take over the management of the Psychic Club. And our mutual friend, the guitarist, said to him, you need to talk to Leela. Like she's the person who can do this. She knows how to manage a business, and she knows everything that there is to know about all the other stuff, like
Yeah.
she's the person. So as much as
She's
I
the right
hadn't,
person for the job.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it was almost like a full circle moment where he'd only been introduced to the metaphysics because he'd come over and experienced it where I was living at the time. And then he'd gone on this big jet, and then I sort of came back into that space, but instead of him being this young kid, or 15 or 16, he was now the owner of the business and running the Psychic Club of Australia. So I'd never really, as much, I mean, I was such an avid reader, a real book girl up from when I was very, very young. Um, so yeah, as much as I'd always dreamed about working in publishing, I hadn't actually planned it, but
Yes.
I
Yep.
was I was very at home there. I loved it. Once I sort of started, I loved it. I really took to the processes. I enjoyed everything about publishing. So yeah, that's how I came to be there. And then a couple of years later, he wanted to take the Psychic Club in a different direction. I left. So after I moved on from the Psychic Club, I thought, what am I gonna do? And I don't even know how many people phone me and say, well, if you wanted to start your own magazine, this is how I would
Of
support
course.
you. This is how I
Yes.
would help you. If you wanted to. And I thought, okay, have these people all got together and had a secret meeting? And no, they hadn't.
So
They had all just sort
synchronistic.
of independently of
You were
each
being
other.
guided.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I thought,
Yeah.
okay, this is too many people. So I had Leon Naxon phone me, I had Sharina phone, like people who really could help me to do that and who actually really wanted me to do that. So it was like and Martin St. James as well, the hypnotist. So it was almost as if other people were seeing something that I couldn't see. And I thought, okay, well, if I get one more person phone me and say this, I'll do it. And yeah, I did. So I dared
And thank
myself
goodness you
and
did.
I did it. And at the time, I, I sort of got a feeling that I wasn't going to be with the Psychic Club for too long because of different things. And I'd been,
It was like an apprenticeship of sorts,
it was,
and such a great environment to grow
uh,
in. Yeah.
it was a real apprenticeship. It was being thrown in the deep end of something really had no idea what I was doing but I loved it. I was happy to get in and learn. I loved all the people. I was talking to authors who I'd read, when I was fangirling. I was talking to Dawn Hill. I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh
Wow.
my
Yeah.
gosh, I cannot believe I'm talking to these people that they're writing in this magazine. And Uri Geller, I reached out to Uri Geller. I was able to talk to, yeah, I met Martin St. James. Yeah, it was just such a great space. So um, met a lot of people and they were all very kind to me. did.
You're easy to be kind to, though.
Oh, thank you, darling.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank
But
you.
how supportive, all those teachers and mentors and people that step forward and can see your amazing potential and just want to, help you kind of, yeah. I love that you kind of fell into it too, but did you? I feel like,
Well,
being that bookworm, yeah,
yeah, I
it was a
do.
natural progression, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, I do wonder whether, because for a lot of the time, I did feel like I kind of tripped over and stumbled into it. And I thought, well, but, did I? Because I had read so much. Like I had studied all, I'd done palmistry, I'd done tarot,
Yes.
I'd
You're like
been
a
to all of
spiritual
these.
academic.
Yeah,
I always see you at Hogwarts, with your stunning kind of, gorgeous witch's hat on, like to me, you're that spiritual academic that, does the work and, loves all of it. But at the same time, the same way people have helped you, you've paid it forward and been very supportive. And I've been, fortunate enough to, be on the receiving end of that. So,
well,
yay. Yeah.
it's still exciting to me that people can get together and talk about it. It's still exciting that we can have our own sand pit and not be scared. And
Yes.
I feel like I can be quite, you know, anxious in social situations. But I know if I'm in a spiritual arena, if I'm with other,
Interesting. Same here.
psychics,
Yeah.
I feel completely at home there, that people aren't going to
Yes.
look at me
Yeah.
like, okay, you weirdo. Like, that if somebody starts talking about a dream that they had, it's exciting to me, and it's very intimate. I feel like it it's um,
It's a deeper
it
connection.
is. It's a far more intimate connection in that
Yes.
space. And
Yeah.
even when people aren't sharing, it's like a oceanic experience. It's almost like, they talk about that if everybody's doing ecstasy, you sort of, your boundaries have disappeared and you're more likely to feel a closeness with those people.
Good
It's
analogy.
it's
It's
like
being high on
doing that.
spirit, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah. And just being high on spiritual community, very
yeah,
open. Yeah.
it's like that, but without any of the side effects and
Yeah.
without waking up the next day wondering what have I done, or not waking up the next day. It's like that, what people are actually striving for, what they secretly want, and
Yes.
stepping out of all of the rules that prevent us from having those connections. And it's
Exactly.
like with Jung, he talks about how it's the search for meaning, and
Yes.
it's in that space that we're really nurturing ourselves and the people around us by having meaning and just giving people permission. It's not even by giving people permission, it's by celebrating the meaning of
Yes.
everybody. Everybody's equal. We all come here. We're all just have, you know,
We're all doing the best we
we're
can
all just doing the best we
in
can.
a difficult situation.
Yeah, and whatever.
At
And well,
times, not always.
no, at
Yeah.
times. And when you do get into that space, you realize how many people come there because they've kind of been pushed outside of the lines because they have had some kind of trauma, or they've had grown up in a difficult situation where they've had to, and very interesting. For example, like John Holland, whose father was, I don't know if you know who John Holland is. He's a
I do know who John
celebrated
Holland is.
medium.
Yeah.
He is one example of somebody who grew up with a parent who was problematic, who learned how to sense what mood their parent was in.
That's so
What,
interesting.
and so sometimes those things do it's the uncomfortable things that push us outside of what we're taught, and we may learn how to, whether it's conscious or subconscious, how to read micro facial expressions, or
Yes.
how to just sense things in ways that other people don't really understand. And that might make us feel weird, but it doesn't discount the experience. And yeah, so when we're with other psychics or people in that spiritual space, we're not asked to discount our experience, and there we can actually be accountable for it and grow it and nurture it and, just feel safe through it as well. A lot of it is
Yes.
about feeling safe, especially for the people who have come there because of these traumas or discomforts.
And I think when you're in a safe environment with like-mindeds, yeah, you can really kind of just be yourself, can't you? And just kind of really, I don't know, I just really love it. And I know community is so important to me. And yeah, it's so good.
Yeah,
So,
and it's not
yeah,
just being with like-minded people. It's like-spirited people. You don't have to think, you don't
like-spirited.
have to even think the same way. You don't have to believe the same
No.
things.
Yeah, good point.
It's
Yeah,
beyond that. And not
yes.
not to call you out on that word because it is that in some ways, but it isn't. Like I've
No, I
meet with a
prefer
lot
that,
of people
like-spirited.
who
I prefer that.
I mean,
Of course I do. Yeah.
that's been, I think, one of the things that has helped me as an editor, talking to people with all sorts of different beliefs, is that I don't have to believe what somebody believes to absolutely enjoy it about them and to accept that and see that, they might have a different idea about it, but they're actually touching the same concepts. And yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, it's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing.
You
So
know,
yeah,
you have an environment where you can have independent thought, you can be creative, you can be authentic, and everyone's celebrated for their uniqueness. And in that uniqueness is togetherness as well. So because you're
absolutely.
not excluding someone because they're not quite fitting into, the norm or whatever. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, as the weird kid, which a lot of, I think, people who come, realize that they're
I was
psychic
definitely the
early,
weird kid.
that you're a,
Yes.
you're a weirdo. And I mean, my, one of my nicknames at school was Freak. So it's very nice to find community. It's very nice to talk to other psychics and know, okay,
Yes.
this is actually where all the cool kids hang out.
That's it.
This is this.
Inquisitive, discerning, independent thought, making up your own mind, being open, open-hearted and open-minded. It's great. I love it.
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
the best discussions, just
Yeah.
beautiful discussions in terms of, so many philosophers in this space. It's beautiful.
It is beautiful.
Yeah.
So, my love, you've received so many prestigious awards
Oh, I
in the
don't know about
spiritual
so many, but
community.
yeah, it's
Well,
it's
yeah.
it's still kind of weird that you can have an award in this space because as I was saying, you couldn't even really, used to be very careful and still am to some degree about even where I tell people that I work in this space. So to
Yes.
be celebrated, have an award here, it's so well, it's cool. It's cool that people can be recognized in this
Do you
space.
know what I love about it? It kind of gives us credibility. Not that we're looking for approval or permission or any of that, but it does tend to give it more of a professional kind of feel about it too, I think. And that makes it feel safer for people. Do you
Absolutely, it
find that?
does. Absolutely, because as much as it is more accepted, there are still, like any profession, people who aren't necessarily genuine, who aren't necessarily in it for the right reasons. And they can be even a very good psychic, but not have very good intentions. And I think that that's why it's nice to have the awards because it's especially awards that like that are peer based because it's other psychics saying, yeah, here's somebody that you can trust. Here's somebody that, you know, is genuine. And
Yeah, yeah.
it's
How's it impacted on your work and your personal growth, do you think?
on the one hand, it's sort of like when I was 17 and doing readings, I always felt like, how can people who have, got husbands and children and careers and everything be turning to somebody who has just is on the brink of life? And I feel a huge responsibility, I think, with having
Because you
an
did start at a very young age too.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was doing readings.
Talk about
in
an
our
old
shop.
soul.
Well, we did readings for, I don't know, people from Brisbane who can remember Tops at the Maya Centre. So I did readings up in Tops, and I can't remember if I was 17 or if I just turned 18, but yeah, it was a long time ago, part of another era. Yeah, but at the time,
Yeah.
it felt like such a responsibility, and it really made me practice, really took my craft
Yes.
seriously because I didn't, the weight of the words, how much credence people would give. And you probably find this, the more accurate that you are, the more weight people give the advice.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
I worried that people would just follow my advice without really thinking about it, without, if you could come in where I lived, the one of the psychics in particular was quite brilliant. And so I thought it was normal for psychics to get people's names and specific details. So
Interesting.
because I thought
So
that
you
was
had that
normal.
exposure very
Yeah,
early on
because I
with
thought,
really good quality
yeah,
psychic and mediumship. Yeah.
yeah, and because I thought that was normal, I thought that's what all psychics did.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Good
that's
point.
just kind of what I thought
Yeah.
happened. and
That was the
and so
standard.
yeah,
My
and so that's
goodness.
kind of what I did, and I didn't think it was a big deal until much later when I realized not everybody does that. But the more accurate that you are, the more kind of people, the more willing people are to put aside their critical thinking and just trust everything that you say. And I've found that very difficult because I was so young, and that I didn't really want people to put away, to give up their own power, to give up their own
Yeah. Yeah.
stuff.
I love that.
And
I think that responsibility, I know I feel it and I'm
yeah,
mindful of it. And I'm often encouraging people to, follow their own intuition and all of that. So I think that's integrity too. You want to do a really good job. You understand the responsibility of it. You don't want them to give their power away. I'm totally with you on that one. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that with the awards, it really highlights that for me. Like it, so I do. It's kind of weird. The more awards I get, the less readings that I actually do, because I think, oh, people, how do I live up to this? How do I prevent people from putting too much, um, val for, just taking what I say on board without having their own critical thinking. But what it has
Yes. Yeah.
allowed me to do, and which I absolutely love, is to support other people and to lift other people up and to,
Yes. Now let's talk about that. Tell me more about how you support other psychics and creators. And I know you've been doing it not just recently, but you've been doing it for decades. So I know you helped me get my publishing deal, and I really appreciate. Oh, let's say you steered me in the right direction.
okay.
So I'm
Oh,
always so grateful to you for that because you are very generous of spirit and
well,
yeah.
I think
So is this
sometimes,
something that you do consciously or is this something that you do professionally? Tell me what that is.
well, I think with the magazines, a lot of that, like with Spheres, we started Spheres, and that was to give people a space, um, where we could just talk about psychic stuff and not create any fear. It was sort of like having some control over the media that the psychics were being represented in, instead of having, all the drama. So it was
Yes.
about giving spirituality its own space, and in that we invited a lot of different groups. We worked with Goddess Association Australia, or Gaia, and we worked with Pan, and we worked with, of course, the Australian Psychics Association and the Tarot Guild of Australia, and we had
It
as
was very
many,
diverse. I do remember that. Yeah.
yeah, we had as many groups in there as possible to give them a voice to help, because
Yes.
this was before the
It also
internet.
brought people together, I thought.
Yes, that was it. A lot of people found their spiritual journey very isolating because people didn't talk about it, or they felt weird talking about it. And so having the magazine, it helped people find each other. So it didn't just help the organizations, but it also meant that those organizations were found by the right people, and the more
Yeah.
people that you have together, the stronger that you are. And so it was almost
Yes.
like a preservation of knowledge as well, in a
I
way.
think it was educating the public, but I do feel like it really had the ability of bringing all different organisations together in a
Yeah,
more kind of, and, you know, I loved that, you know, everyone has a voice. And, you know, as you said, you know, we all resonate with, you know, whatever it might be, but it's just wonderful to be, you know, to have everyone come together like that. So,
yeah. And at the time, we had a lot of a lot of the spiritual publishing. Hay House was very big at the time, so we had a lot of
yes, yeah.
American um,
Yeah, good
authors.
point.
We had a lot
Yeah.
of American insight. We didn't have a lot of local.
There wasn't an
And
Australian voice, not
yeah,
really.
and I know when I was a kid, and I was pretty young still when we started Spheres. So but when through all of the books, every time I was looking to something and there'd be a ritual, everything was geared to the Northern Hemisphere. You could very rarely find something where, go in the backyard, grab a wattle tree, or, it was all like, you had to find, something that didn't even grow here. You would never
So
find it. You
true.
would never find it in your backyard. You'd never find it on a walk down the creek. And, I always felt like, magic or paganism, all of that by its very nature is connected to place, connected to earth. Like
That's
that's,
right.
and the more you
Connected to
sort
that
of,
sacred ground under your
yeah,
feet, under your
yeah,
feet, right?
under
Yeah,
under my feet. And
that's
so a
it.
lot of what we did with spheres was a little bit tricky because I suppose I wanted that Australian spirituality. I'd
But everyone's
lived,
so connected to the opposite. Yeah,
yes, and I had lived not just in Brisbane, but I'd lived in Melbourne and I'd lived in Darwin and I had traveled. We'd had a combi and driven all over the place and slept in the back of this floral painted orange combi. And I know
I
absolutely
can
that
almost picture that.
magic, it was pretty cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, and we'd lived. Right, we'd lived side by side with magic, and my brother had worked at Cooinda out at Kakadu, and we'd had a lot of really fantastic, very potent magical experiences in places connected to place in Australia. And so,
yes.
yeah, one of
It's
my
like when
things
I
was,
learnt the Australian bushflower essences
oh,
and everyone was learning the bark, you know,
yes,
essences.
yeah,
But to me, I want to be able to walk, you know, I've got 3.5 acres of bush here, and I want to be able to walk into the bush and, you know, go and do my own foraging, you know, and yeah, I really believed all of that kind of gave, Australia a voice. So good on you.
yeah, well, it was a big part of it. And I think when we were
Yeah,
living in Melbourne, we lived with a guy who was right into permaculture.
yeah,
And a lot of that thinking was not just to put what has been imported from another environment into your
yeah,
garden, actually work with it. It's much smarter to work with the essence of what is right here and what works with your climate, what works in what works here. But, it is that connection. And yeah, so what we did is put Louise Hay next to people who were local, and we gave them the same space. We put them on the same, um, on the same stage, but also on the same level on that stage. So if somebody wrote an article, it didn't matter whether they had a book deal or they were just somebody who'd had a really potent spiritual experience that nobody's ever heard of that wasn't an author. We
yeah,
gave them, we gave them the space because it was good information that would really help people. And so we kind of elevated, and it was nice because around the same time as we were doing that, we were just seeing there was Blue Angel was starting, and so we had then an Australian publishing house that we could actually really celebrate in the magazine too.
And
So we
how
had
brilliant has that
Lucy,
been?
yeah, you know, we
Yeah.
had Lucy Cavendish in there.
Yes.
She'd had the Oracle Tarot with Hay House, but then, you know, we started to, she started to be published with Blue Angel, for one example. And we had when Simon, the Australian Psychics Association, did introduce the Psychic of the Year awards, those people then got promoted got media space, and that led to them
Yeah.
having book deals. So we could see that what we were doing
Was making an
was
actual
really,
difference.
yeah, it was actually making a
It was giving people
difference.
a platform, and
Yeah,
it was kind of like, and it was an equal platform.
yeah. And so not
So not
only,
this hierarchical, everything that comes out of America is better, and nothing, nothing, let's think globally, everything's wonderful. But at the same time, I think it really did give, yeah, I love that so much. Now let's talk about Simon Turnbull.
yes,
Now,
wonderful,
we both
Simon.
had the pleasure of knowing this incredible visionary. And yeah, and you're writing his memoir, which is
Well, I'm
really
not
you're not
writing it
writing it?
because
Okay.
he had already written a lot of his memoir, not as much as I had hoped, not as much as he had hoped. But
Yes.
I had a copy of what he had finished before he passed. And so I was able to go over what he had written,
Oh,
and
that's even
then
better. So it's his
it's
words.
his words, absolutely.
Yeah. And you're
And
kind of, yeah, doing your magic, your wordsmith on there. Yeah.
well, very carefully, but really just filling in the gaps and piecing puzzles pieces together. So where I had a lot of content that was Simon's, so where he'd written something, I think, oh, I don't think he meant to come back to this, but I was able to find the information and slot it all in like a jigsaw puzzle. So
Yes.
we have, I think, 45,000 words in
Wow.
or close to, which is made up of, it's his words, but we've um, filled it out with all the interviews that he did over the years, where he spoke
Yes.
to other people from around the world. And he
Yeah.
he was born in
He was really
1950.
the Molly Meldrum of the spiritual
He
world, wasn't he?
was. He absolutely was.
Let's be honest. I
That's
know he was the founder of what are we calling it? The Australian
well, yeah,
Psychics
he
Association.
was one
Yeah.
of the co-founders. So
Co-founders.
his
Yeah.
book talks about how that all came together, and
Yes.
it's it's full of spiritual characters. And Simon was an absolute character. Molly Meldrum is that's a really good yeah, that's exactly. He was so big, larger than life,
Vibrant. Yeah. And just,
vibrant,
yeah,
but
larger than life. Yeah.
he just loved people, and he loved spirituality, and it's like a postcard from another time, and it shows just how far,
Oh,
like
thank you for
like we
doing
were
that. That is
talking
so
about
great.
before,
Yeah.
because he was born in 1950, and so when he had had experiences in his childhood, but when he started to really scratch a little deeper at the surface in his 20s, it was the 1970s. So it was different. He talks about when the founder of Reiki first toured Australia, and how that was different to what it is now, and all sorts of really interesting stories.
Yeah.
It's almost like
Oh, he was an
journeying from the
interesting
Wild
man,
West.
very
Like,
intelligent,
yeah,
highly intuitive, highly
yes.
supportive,
So the only
a
thing,
wise man. Yeah.
yeah, the only thing I think he
But
would be,
also a bit eccentric and
oh,
wonderful. And
completely,
yeah,
completely
completely. Yeah.
eccentric, completely, I mean, absolutely. When we did the psychics directory, he so wanted to do that. He wanted to do it to elevate psychics. He loved every single member of the
Now
association. He
that's
just
genuine service to the collective, isn't it? Really?
yeah, and the
You know,
whole thing of introducing the Psychic of the Year awards was to create positive media for psychics, to
positive media.
put psychics in the positive, because they help people, and this is magical, and it's amazing. And I think he
Yes.
really did feel that
He definitely did
intimacy,
that so well.
that
Yeah.
that connection and
That's his love
intimacy.
legacy, isn't it, really? I mean,
Oh,
he's left a love legacy, which is astonishing, really.
well,
Now
yeah.
your sister, your gorgeous sister's also she's got is it a shop called Tarotopia? So it
Yeah,
runs in the
yeah.
family. So
Yeah, well,
how
it's
does that kind of link in with your own work, you
well,
know?
that's sort of another full circle story where we had the psychic shop where we sold tarot all the way back when, and so she came into the shop. I think she was maybe she was either 16 or 17 because I was either 17 or 18, and we're quite close in age. And she was, I can't remember what had happened, but she was in a little bit of distress, and I gave her a tarot deck. It was it, which actually it was the Magician Tarot, and the deck is dedicated to someone called Rebecca, and her name is Rebecca. So it
Oh,
was it was
wow.
a really
Yeah.
lovely gift. And so now we go flash
My
forward.
daughter's Rebecca. There you go.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Mm.
great. So now we go flash forward. When we had spheres and spellcraft, and of course, again, it was before the internet and internet shopping. We had mail order shop so we'd have the authors, but we'd made it easy for people who lived in the country or remotely or where you didn't have
Oh, how wonderful.
shops. People could order the product
Yeah.
from us. And then as the
Gosh,
internet
that was
came in,
before its time.
well, there was a need. We couldn't
Yeah.
I knew how hard it was to hunt down some of these books. So we'd import them. We just, the whole thing was connecting people with good information and, uplifting them and,
Love that.
it's supporting the authors and the artists and everything as well. It was really lovely. So yeah, I had wanted when the internet came along with the internet shopping, that was a big thing, ordering online. I thought, oh, we really should turn our mail order into a web-based shop. This is what has to happen, and we should maybe call it a different name, like separate it
I
from
do love the name
from the magazine.
Tarotopia.
So I
Yeah,
thought, you know what I would call a tarot shop? I'd call it Tarotopia.
I love
That's
it.
a great name. So I looked up to register the domain name and found that somebody else already had it.
Oh, how annoying.
How dare they? So I
How
looked up
dare
who they
they?
were. Not only did they have the name I wanted, but they were based in Brisbane. And
Wow.
not
Okay.
only did they have the name that I wanted and were based in Brisbane, but their online shop was so good. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to try to I'm not going to try to do this because these people are already doing it and they're already doing it really well. So I rang them up and introduced myself, and they probably thought, who is this lunatic ringing up and saying that, we're ahead of the game. But I thought, I said, look, I would rather sell you an ad. Would you like to advertise and we can support each other? Because I know that we have a market for you because we're already selling to them through the mail order. But you have a much bigger range, a really great website, and they appreciated my honesty and we got on really well. So Michael had started Tarotopia and his mum was right into tarot. And
Yeah.
Michael passed the Tarotopia baton to Debbie, his sister, and Debbie and her mum used to do markets and everything up here. Anyway, I loved Debbie. I don't know if you ever met Debbie, but she is just fantastic. She's another redhead like me. I felt like she was my secret sister, and we
Yeah.
always joked that Tarotopia was actually energetically mine. It was always a bit of a joke about
Yes.
because that's how we'd found it because I'd had the absolute vision of it, but then I found somebody
Yes.
else that already
It was a shared
manifested it.
vision. How
Somebody
often
else had
does that
already
happen? Yeah.
done my vision. So when
Yeah.
so when Debbie came to want to, move into something else, I was really hoping that she would find somebody who I felt a connection with. Really thought I was like, oh, please don't sell it to anybody until I've met them, and I think make sure that they like me, like
Yeah.
make sure
Yeah.
they know that
Because
I
you had
come
that
with the
real
package.
emotional connection to it.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was a fun connection, and
Yeah.
I sort of had dreamed about doing it, taking it on myself, but I didn't have the time or the space. At the time I had a lot going on. The kids, we didn't have any space in the house anymore. I had, more kids than time, and I still had everything else going on. I didn't have time to take on a whole other business. But then one day, and it was a funny day, because I was on pain medication because I'd had a ganglion thing in my wrist that had exploded, and Rebecca had to come down to take me to the
I
hospital because
do
I couldn't
remember that.
drive.
Yeah.
And and I was like, hey, you know what? When I'm, probably shouldn't have been making any big decisions. You should have Tarotopia. I can't do it, but you could. And she's like, what are you talking about? I said, you should have this. So I messaged Debbie and sort of said, hey. And she was like, well, because she'd had the sale had kept falling through of Tarotopia. It just kept falling through for her. And she was like, I don't know if I'm ever, are you sure you don't want it? I said, I can't have it. But I was like, but Rebecca could, and she would be so awesome at it. And so, yeah, she actually, we were
What a
driving.
wonderful story.
Well, we were
Look at that birth
driving,
story. My
and she was like,
goodness.
hang on, let me just check. So she checked with Granny, not Nan, but not our Nana, but our Granny.
Yeah.
What do you think about this? And Granny said, do it. She's like, okay, let's just do it. Let's do it. So yeah, we so she just became the new owner of Tarotopia, and she really is the best person. I think it was always destined to be with her. She is amazing at it. She's got the history, she's got the psychic thing, she just makes, and she's
And it's her
created,
thing. Isn't that great?
yeah,
Yeah.
she's created such a magical space because Teratopia was always online, but she has the shop now, and she has over 2,500 products. So this is like
Wow. A
thousands of
really good
tarot and oracle
collection.
decks. It's
Yeah.
amazing. I'm at
That's an
in
extensive collection. Yeah.
I'm in complete heaven when I go over there.
Yeah.
But she's created a really special space out at Strathpine where people come in, they draw a card from the barrel. She gives them a one card reading. They can browse. It's just, and it's all sorts of people coming in. The real rat
Fascinating
bags, the
people.
real
Yeah.
ruffians.
Oh, I
The
noticed that.
young
Yeah. When
young
I work in
guys. Yeah.
those gorgeous, esoteric bookstores and things. I actually love that, people from all walks of life, I find that fascinating. Now, what I really want to talk to you about, I'm really super excited. I
Yes.
have it in my hot little hand. The beautiful new Maxine Gadd's Zooloogica, the Steampunk Oracle. It's really unique and original and magical. And
Oh,
can you tell us about this oracle and its creative process? Like, it's just, I wanted to unveil the deck today, and I'm looking forward to doing a full unveiling. I'll do that online, but I started reading the guidebook, and it's so well written, of course, but I just love this concept. It's so unique and so magical. So yeah, let's talk about that for a minute.
well, it's Maxine Gadd has created all of the images, and I'd worked with Maxine on her Precious Gems Oracle when I was the editor. I was brought on as the editor for that project. But while we were working on it, I'd sort of suggested, hey, how about this or how about that, and given some examples of what I'd meant, like for a little poem that was, directly from, or sort of yeah, so the inspired prose and some divinatory meanings. So she loved my examples so much. She was like, actually, I love this. Would you mind? Would you like to write that for all of the crystals? And I
I
really enjoyed it.
absolutely
And
love that deck too. I think it's just, um, yeah, just that, the crystals really give that deck some beautiful depth and just bring those gorgeous archetypes alive. I love that. Yeah.
well, yeah, I loved working on that because I wasn't just editing then. I was able to really come in and be part of the space. And Maxine was incredibly generous with her praise of my writing. And then she created the Zooloogica, all the different characters that you can see on the cards there. And because she, she really thought that I had something else, something that she would like. And so she invited me. She asked that I could I be the writer? And so, yeah, it happened. I said, absolutely. I love the concept of steampunk. I love how she's
Oh, I
created
love
all of
the
the different.
steampunk.
Yeah, I love it. I love how it all comes together. And as much as I've worked on numerous oracles and tarot in one capacity or another over the years, many, and I've been an editor, I've been a contributor, I've been a co-author, or I've added little bits like I did with the precious gems, but this is the first time I've actually been the author. And I
Interesting.
was
Yeah.
so
I didn't realize that. Yeah.
yeah, so as much as I've done a lot, I hadn't written an oracle on my own. I'd sort of come in and been in somebody else's space, this was mine. I could do whatever I wanted. She gave me free rein to do whatever I wanted.
It's
And
beautifully
so
written. It's
I
so magical. And
yeah,
I love that it's so unique. And, I'm even reading a little part here, and it's got here shifting gears and pivoting cogs become components of your chosen destiny. Like,
it's
it's
pretty. It was
beautiful. You've done such a
so
great job.
cool because I could
So cool.
it was everything. It was so much coming together because I was able to draw on all of these wonderful books that I've read and read even more. So when you have a look at the messages, if you are a reader, you'll see, oh, I can see that's a bit of Arthur Conan Doyle there, or oh, I can feel a little bit of Jules Verne over there, or you'll see absolutely that's Edgar Allan Poe inspired bit here or there. But if you haven't read, if you're not a reader, it doesn't matter. You'll still
Well,
have
it's
the
easy to
benefit.
read.
You'll come
I
into
think
that.
yeah,
Yeah, and then it also, because steampunk, it's so resilient, it's so resourceful. So I connected to that as
it has
well. And
so many moving parts.
yes, it has so many moving parts, but it's always future. It's even though it's sort of anachronistic because
It's
you're
also
drawing,
futuristic.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
drawing from the past and you're working with what is already present, but it's working towards the future. How can I get to the future in the way that I want and be where that I want? And it's inventive. It's
It's
so
very inventive.
yeah, it's very
Inventive's a
inventive.
really good word. And
And
it's really obvious to me too, Leela, that you have a deep intuitive connection with Maxine Gadd. I love it
yeah,
when the art and the words weave together with real synergy, as opposed to, there's some amazing decks out there, but sometimes the art doesn't really marry with the
well,
words.
it was good because I had the artwork and I could connect to the artwork
Yes.
and really get
Doesn't that make
into
a difference?
yeah, it
Yeah.
really did. I wasn't just writing something and then, but it doesn't matter which way. Like for you, you're writing something and then the author creates for your writing. There's still that connection, there's still that synergy. But it was interesting to me to have that. I think the visual meditation, the visual prompt, and to go into the images and ask them, what do you want to say? Who are you?
Yes, they
And
speak to you. They certainly speak to you.
yeah, and have them take me through their story.
They're
And
like, it's like portals, and you go into the portal, and you've got this magical creature that you have obviously communicated with, and you've channeled their essence and their wise words somehow. And the cards have incredible meaning. So celebrating you, my love.
oh, thank you.
Congratulations.
Well, it's
So great.
it's so weird because when I went back to do the proofing or when I used the cards, I think I don't remember writing that. I don't remember writing that at all. Like this, it feels so other to me. But that some of it really does challenge what we already think. And I think the butterfly card is probably, I don't know, it's good to I'll just talk about that because I hope that this deck and what a lot of the characters did want is for people to let go of what they already assume. So if you draw the butterfly
Oh, I love that
card,
so much. You know, those cliche
yeah,
meanings, you know.
yeah,
I
is
love
to
it when we challenge the generic meaning,
go beyond that. And
go
the
beyond that. And that's what this deck does. It goes beyond, to me, the generic meaning that we all know. You
yeah,
know, we
so
all know
you
that symbolic language,
yeah,
right?
absolutely. So
Yeah.
butterfly, you think, oh, transformation. But a steampunk butterfly actually may never have been a caterpillar. It may never have been anything else. It may have actually just manifested by necessity or desire or intention as a butterfly. It may not have anything to do with transformation. And when you look at the butterfly, and this was a really fun process, because some of these cards, some of these images made me work really, really hard. When you look at the butterfly, you'll see that the wings are made up of parts, and it has Lady Elgin written on the actual wing. So I was like,
Right.
what is this? So I had a look, and the Lady Elgin was a steamship. It was a first-class steamer built in the 1950s. So I thought, oh, how cool is that? How
How
cool is that?
clever.
Because this image is actually created from a steamship, and now it's in a
Yeah.
steampunk oracle. How wonderful is this? And then
And the
you know,
detail
the
and the
detail.
connection
The
and the
Maxine,
depth.
Maxine was unaware of this. She had intuitively chosen this piece of this image and built it into the butterfly. She hadn't looked it up at all. She was like, "What?" I was like, "Well, it was meant to be." The Lady Elgin ended up having a beautiful career, got into lots of accidents and mishaps and was repaired and repaired, but it wasn't even 10 years old when and I I kind of really like this story because it was coming back over Lake Michigan after it had taken some Union people over, not to see I think Abraham Lincoln. It was the
Oh, look at
person
the
who
history
was,
of that.
yeah, it's
That's
got this super
amazing.
history. It wasn't him, but it was the person opposing him was doing a political
I love it
talk.
when these creatures talk to us and half the time
Oh,
we don't even realize it
it
until
was nuts.
afterwards.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
it was
nuts.
coming
Yeah.
back in
In a
storm
beautiful,
force
crazy way.
gales, had
Yeah.
all of its lights on, complete.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, Abraham Lincoln's opponent it was. So
I
had
love
all of
that.
its lights on, but another boat who had one tiny light on, and wasn't able to maybe maneuver around the Lady Elgin, um, crashed into it, actually came into the side of it. It was much smaller, but it was and it thought it was damaged, but that the steamboat wasn't because it was so big. But it turned out its damage wasn't anywhere near what the Lady Elgin was, and it ended up sinking. It was a real tragedy. So the idea with the butterfly is it sort of has a bit of a moth attracted to the light sort of element because the Lady Elgin was all
Ah,
bright in the darkness,
I love that.
but it's still, it still wasn't enough for it to avoid this difficulty. So this wing, this part of the butterfly has somehow washed up on the shore and been found and been transformed into something which kind of
Beautiful.
defies the laws of nature because it's heavy and it's a butterfly, it flies. So there was all of this stuff. And
That is so brilliant.
when I looked into the cards and how they were constructed, I was finding all of these amazing things to
Constructed's a
draw
good word.
it is. It's the way that they've come together and how resourceful that these creatures are, how resilient
How
they are,
resilient.
how determined they are. They just
There is a
persevere.
strength to it. There is a resilience to it.
And that's why I actually dedicated it to my beautiful sister because yeah, we know we are, I feel, doing what we're doing now, that yeah, it is sort of a
Perfect.
testimony to that resilience and
I love
resourcefulness
that.
and determination, and in some way it was a celebration of us. And
Congratulations, my love.
yeah,
It's a
yeah, so yeah,
wonderful, wonderful deck. I
thank
loved it
you.
online. I love it more in person. So I highly recommend, if you don't have this beautiful deck, the Zooloogica, the Steampunk Oracle, to get it. It's so worth adding it to your collection because it is quite unique and quite amazing. Now, how can our listeners connect with you and learn more about what you do?
Well, they can have a look at the Zooloogica. We made its own website because I love it so much. So they can go to steampunkzoologica.com, or
Yes.
they can just look me up on social media and
And
find
we'll
me
also
on
put all
there.
of those connections in the show notes as
Yeah.
well.
And one day
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
follow my own advice and make a website for me so that people can find me and know what I do. But until then, that's the best way.
But do you know what? Your work speaks for itself, and you've always done it without ego. You've always done it from your soul. And, you know, you're just incredibly amazing, celebrating
Oh,
you. Thank
thank
you
you.
so much,
Thank you.
for
Thank
coming
you.
on Ask the Oracle. I absolutely loved it. It was such a wonderful conversation. Thank you, my love.
I thank you so very much for having me. It's been a complete honor. Love your work.
Beautiful. Okay. Thank you,
Thank
my love.
you. Okay, bye.
Bye.